Welcome to Tracy Erin Talks, where functional medicine meets personal development. You want to be living your best life, but the overwhelming amount of health information out there is confusing, and the way you think about yourself is keeping you stuck. You know you are meant for more. As a women's health specialist, my aim is to simplify and equip you with the tools you need to be beautifully balanced from the inside out. Welcome back to Tracy Erin Talks, a podcast with my friend today, Kyla Festerly. We met many years ago here in Middle Tennessee when her family was living here. And we were introduced through a mutual friend, and we found that we had so much in common with, well, originally coming from California all the way out to Tennessee. And this was before all those COVID transplants, I might add. We found that we had homeschooling and holistic living in general in common. And so our families bonded quickly. But shortly thereafter, Kyla and her family ended up moving out back to the west side of the United States to Idaho. And we stayed in touch through Christmas cards and that kind of thing. But it wasn't until I did some functional medicine training and joined Cellcore as a practitioner and was going to be traveling back to Boise for a muscle testing training and for their annual eco conference that I got back in touch with Kyla and just asked, "Hey, can we meet for coffee or let's get together? It's been a couple years." And Kyla happened to be just beginning her health journey, and our relationship reconvened at, it seemed like, the right time. And
Mm.
so I remember Kyla picked me up at that Boise airport and took me back to her house, and I got to see all of her growing kids. And she made this most amazing soup. Kyla's a very good cook, with sweet potatoes and cinnamon that I still cannot stop dreaming about. So I had a really great memory. And after I came home from that experience in Boise with Cellcore, I had presented everything that I had learned to her, and we decided to start working together. So Kyla became one of my very first long-term clients, and it's been an absolute joy to watch her go through her process and to encourage her along the way, as my story was very similar to hers. And so, Kyla, I am so happy that you're here today because I want you to share your personal story with my listeners. I think so many people will resonate with your experience. And I would love for you to just start from the beginning and tell us, like, what was your health like before? How did this whole thing get started? What was that experience like? And let's just start there and we'll see where this
Okay.
goes.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I am happy to share my experience. It's been a very long and somewhat scary and treacherous journey, but I'm very thankful for like where I'm at today. 'Cause there's been so much growing as far as like when people talk about your health being also like physical and emotional and spiritual. I really felt like I got that whole sphere and I learned so much about myself physically and spiritually and mentally, and where it just was a big growing experience. So there's a lot of amazing things that came out of it, but it was a very difficult time for me. My health before was, I think a lot of people before they experience something very deeply chronic and scary like this, I think they just look back and think, I thought I was fine. I felt like I was eating okay and I was working out and moving my body and drinking lots of water. But it wasn't until I got really sick that I realized my sleep was messed up. I was moving my body, but in very stressful ways. I had a lot of stress going on in my life. I was very spread thin. I was overcommitting myself. I didn't really know how to say no to people. I also felt emotionally, and I think this goes into like a lot of like trauma experiences and stuff. But what I learned was that I had felt like I had to fix everyone's problems. So that added to like a lot of the stress that I had in my life. And we always prided ourselves on like eating well, but we still ate out. but that was just a little spoke in the wheel. It was a whole bunch of things I feel like came together right at the perfect moment to really just make me crash. And it was in August 2021, at the end of August. There was a lot of stress happening in the world at the time. COVID Delta was going around, and we had a lot of friends that whose husbands were healthy, young men, and they were getting severely ill. And I was stressed about that, and stressed about things the government is doing and my children, all these things. I just felt a lot of fear. And I was very like deep in social media, like the happenings of what's going on. And one day, all my children started getting sick, like viral sick, cough, stuffy nose, all of that. And I started getting a sore throat. And I was like, oh no, I have a sore throat. And in the back of my head, I was just thinking, oh my gosh, it's COVID. Like it was immediate fear, and I said, okay, I thought I'm getting sick. I have one more thing I have to do. I need to go get some cardstock for a homeschool project. So we're gonna run out to the store, we're gonna get this cardstock. And we got there and it was me and my daughter. And I just had my first, what I believe was at the time a panic attack. I'd never had one before. I've heard people talk about them, but at the moment, I didn't know what was going on. My body temperature just spiked. I got tunnel vision, and I just felt an immediate sense of fear. Like the walls were closing in on me. I have to get out of here. So we just got out of there and left. And at the time I thought, oh, I just need to eat something. I haven't eaten anything. Or so I ate a banana, went in the truck, blasted the air conditioner, but I was shaky. It was like there was this residual symptoms that were happening in my body. And I went home and I laid down and I was shaky the whole time. And I just felt this brain fog that just like descended on me. And I felt so disconnected and like almost out of body. And my sister at the time was like, "Oh, you're having an anxiety attack. This is a panic attack." All these things, and I didn't really know what was going on, so I just went home and slept. But the next day I had acute symptoms of like a viral illness. So I had a stuffy nose, I had like one of my sinuses was clogged, but I had this pressure in my head that I could only describe as a helmet. Like it was like a helmet of clouded pressure underneath my skull that was just like putting so much pressure on my brain that it made everything foggy around me. I felt as if I was walking around in a dream. And it was just very bizarre. Like I'd never experienced anything like that. And looking back, I tell people whatever happened, it went right up into my sinus and like straight to my brain stem. Like that's how I feel. Cause it was just one side of my sinus completely stuffed up for one day. And then the next day it was completely clear and gone. But I had a cough and I had other bizarre symptoms that started happening, and it was mostly nervous system stuff. So I was feeling pins and needles. My body was jerking like involuntarily. I would have jerk, like my leg would jerk or my arm or just right out from my chest, like pull me up out of bed. Um, I I couldn't rest. I just felt so uneasy and unsettled inside. I had my hands would fall asleep for weeks. I felt like I had a pair of gloves on my hand. Like I told my husband, it's just so weird. I feel like I have gloves on my hand. Like it's the weirdest thing. Just lots of different bizarre symptoms like that, but mixed in with like also a chronic cough or, days of on and off nausea. I couldn't eat. It was, I mean, my husband was making me bone broth, just loading it down with butter and coconut oil because I just couldn't get any, I didn't want to eat. I felt so just icky and gross. And that's kind of what the beginnings of it were. Like the first few weeks, it matured into something very scary, but that was through October, and then thankfully you came in November, and the trip of having you come was such a grace from the Lord because first of all, it was lovely seeing you, but at the same time, I had no idea you were, like, about to, like, go on this journey of becoming this health practitioner." And I had no idea. It was just that's why I'm like, it was just the Lord. He was just there and he met our needs, you know? But when you came, that whole visit of having you there is like a blur to me. Like, I don't even know how I made that soup. Like,
It was so good.
it's just it's just a blur. I had so much fatigue, like, I couldn't walk up the stairs without my heart feeling like it was pounding out of my chest, and I just it was a lot of it was, I just don't feel good, and that's when I learned that word malaise, where it's just a general feeling of, I just don't feel good, and so I had seen shortly before you came, I went to my primary care provider, and he said, "Have you ever had mono?" And I thought, "I don't know. I don't think so." And he said, "Well, I'm gonna test you for Epstein-Barr virus." And I said, "Okay." And at the time, I had so much nausea, I couldn't even sit up and, like, listen to him and Joel talk. It was like I had so much brain fatigue. I just ended up laying down, and my husband just took the wheel and started telling him all the things I was going through and dealing with, because I didn't even have the strength to explain it to him. So he essentially told me that my Epstein-Barr virus test was positive and it was a virus, and hey, you just got to deal with it. It's a virus, it'll go away. And I thought, when is it going to go away? Like, in a week? Is it going to take months? He was like, some people deal with this for years. And it just crushed me. It just crushed me. I was like, Lord, there is no way I can do this for years. And so I think that's really when the fear and the panic sets in, which creates a whole other, stem of symptoms in your body just from the anxiety of it all. Um, so after that, still before you came, I went and saw a naturopathic physician, and I was really disappointed. I was really disappointed because I thought he would have more education and more knowledge and understanding. And he just kind of seemed like, oh yeah. And like, he just wanted to give me supplements. And I just thought, this isn't right, you know? But at the
Mhm.
time, I was also still in the mindset of like, can you just give me something to make this go away? I was just on the cusp of actually something great. I was about to learn so much about my body and health and what healing actually looks like.
I love the way that you said that.
Yeah.
Little did you know what was around the corner.
Yeah, I didn't. At the time, it felt very depressing and scary, and it felt very hopeless. I did a lot of crying, a lot of crying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can completely relate to you because there were more times than I care to admit that I felt so much self pity, like
Mhm.
despair. Why me? Why this? Why now? Both of us
Mhm.
had little children at home.
Oh, yeah.
Feels so wrong that, like, mom is the center of family life. But when
Mhm.
mom's taken out, the entire family suffers. And so the mental, emotional toll that something like this, like a true health crisis, takes on the entire family is
Mhm.
just uh, really immeasurable. So you saw that naturopath and they offered you
Mhm.
supplements, and you just knew that that was not the path forward for you. And so
Mhm.
I remember sharing with you about everything I was learning through Cellcore about how the root cause of disease had to do with toxicity, and there was a roadmap that we could follow. There were pathways inside of our body that if we opened these up, then our body could detoxify better. And there was certain other supplements that contained things like fulvic and humic acid that got
Mhm.
into the mitochondria. So on a cellular level was able to pull things out. And it just seemed like a really good fit. And we got started right away, like around
We
Christmas time,
did.
right?
Yeah, we did. I think it just took a couple weeks of you being home from your trip for us to be like, we're going to work together. And then we just bought the whole comprehensive protocol up front. And I started the first phase, which is opening drainage pathways. I started it right at Christmas time because I remember it made, I felt I had headaches and I mean, incredibly so because my body was going through so much craziness that like getting headaches, I was like, well, headaches hasn't been part of this, but I was getting some really big headaches for probably like 3 days when I first started opening drainage pathways.
Mhm.
And they were pretty intense. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
right at Christmas time. I remember
Mhm,
texting you like, "Try Epsom salts in your bath," and dry
mhm,
brushing, and, like, we were trying to troubleshoot all these things to get the body to begin to open up so that it can release,
mhm,
whatever it's holding on to. One of my favorite healing quotes that I cannot forget, a doctor said it to me years ago. They said, "We're not sick from what we take in, we're sick from what we can't get rid of." And it
mhm,
gave me this mental image of like, what is the body holding on to in terms of toxicity that
mhm,
is piling up and causing symptoms to, you know,
mhm,
magnify everything that we're feeling. And it's that idea of that toxin bucket. And if we can lower that toxin bucket, or we can reduce and or resolve completely our symptoms. And it became like a way to think about illness in the body rather than in a conventional medical mindset. Like you mentioned, you take the pill and you get better. But it's like, well, do
mhm,
we ever think about how the body actually heals itself? How that
mhm,
pill actually translates to feeling better? And so this whole new thing was a way to process, okay, let's move forward with this potential diagnosis that we have this virus here. Now, how do we get the body to do the work of fighting this virus? And what is burdening the body that's causing this virus to proliferate?
mhm.
And,
Yeah.
so it was shortly thereafter, I feel like a month or so later, we did the total tox burden, which is a really nice comprehensive panel through the lab, Vibrant Wellness. And it's pages and pages and pages long, but it looks at the major things like pesticide exposure and environmental molds and other inhalants and things that we ingest as well. It looks at all kinds of air contaminants and anything that could
Mhm.
be in our environment that is creating this toxic exposure that we might not be aware of. And one of the insidious things about things like this is, unlike a food allergy, you know right away if you have a food allergy to peanuts and you eat a peanut, you get a reaction. But sometimes to environmental pollutants, it's like days later or weeks later or
Right.
even years later, these things stack up in the body. And that's why it ends up being difficult to quote unquote diagnose without actual testing, because you don't know what the body is storing unless you
Right.
get a look under the hood, so to speak. And so that test was insightful for us because if I remember right, glyphosate came back high and
Mhm.
a food mold, and so we were like, "Okay, now we can have some direction and troubleshoot." Am I remembering correctly, there was, like, baseball fields around the area or a golf course or something?
Yeah, we live right next to we live in a suburb area that has parks and baseball fields all over. So they
Yes,
spray everywhere. Like it's
yes.
a lot of common public areas here that just have covered in beautiful grass, but it's all sprayed.
Exactly. I feel like it's a
Mhm.
common misconception because people like you or me who are really conscious about the food that we eat, we try to do our best. Of course, we have limited budgets, we have big families, so you're not buying everything organic, but you're trying to
Right,
stick to the things that you should. And you're conscious about your home environment, you're doing all these things, you're thinking, how could something like a pesticide like glyphosate be high in our bodies? But then you test and you realize, wow, this is coming from, so we don't use spray on our grass, but what if your neighbors do? And what if
oh,
you
yeah.
live near the public spaces? Then it's, we're walking barefoot, we're we're ingesting it through the air, and we have all these ways of getting exposure.
Yeah. I actually wasn't surprised that my levels were so high. I was surprised about the food mold being high,
Mhm.
and I was very thankful that my environmental levels of mold were low. I mean, I that was one of the things that I had heard had gone together with Epstein-Barr, mold, and Lyme, and I think the hardest part for me I think it's hard for a lot of people that are in this position, but it's like the fear of it all is like, what if it is lying? You know, what because
Mhm.
I've heard people go through terrible things with Lyme and like what if it is Lyme or what if it is mold or what if this happens for years of my life? Like, you know what I'm
Oh,
saying?
yeah.
And I think that's why I wanted to go with the comprehensive protocol because it just addresses all of that. And I thought, I'm not going to test for Lyme. I'm just going to walk through this protocol, even though we knew it was going to be a good solid 14, 15 months. I felt like I had something that wouldn't necessarily give me answers, that I finally felt like I was getting treatment, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. So, I do have something I actually wanted to read in my journal real quick because I had written so much symptoms down and I looked back and this was November shortly before you came. And
Yes,
I
please.
wrote that I had a bad night last night. And this is how I described what I couldn't describe it any other way. I just said wave. It felt like waves of energy that would start in my abdomen and move up like through my spine and into my head. Anxiety, intense feeling in my feet, hands, and up the back of my calves and into my forearm, pulsing in my head, hands, and feet. Couldn't think straight, felt fear, heart was beating and racing. I was hot. My bicep, like just my bicep independently, my right hand would just go numb at different times. I was dreaming very vividly. I couldn't sleep at all, and I had loud ringing in my ears. And then I had a cough that would come and go. My muscles were very weak and shaky. And then from there, I started having on and off nausea. And I even had warmth, what I describe as warmth, vibration, and tingling in my feet, my hands, and my calves. And then I have one entry where I wrote that I had my knees felt knobby and swollen. And that's funny because I don't even remember that. But apparently I had it at one point. So yeah, there was just a lot that was happening in a very small space of time. But once I started Cellcore, I did feel like I was getting treatment, and then from there, it really helped me have a map and an idea of how the body actually heals. Like, what was
Mhm.
I getting rid of in my body that needed to come out? I think the overwhelming part of it was going, okay, I'm sick now. I don't know what's going on, but now we need to look at our water and now we need to eat all organic and now we need to get rid of everything. And it was that
Mhm.
mindset again of like, okay, just throw everything out and start new. But it's like, well, we can't afford to do that. So
Right.
it was almost like it forces you to really just trust this process. And it was one thing at a time after that, one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, and we moved through each of the different phases, and the one particular phase focuses on gut health in general and parasite cleansing. And I remember I have lots of fun memories with you on that.
That was my
Like,
favorite phase.
now, did you feel better after? Tell me how your experience was. Like, at what point did you notice a turning point? What were some of the peaks and the valleys for you during all of that?
So I took out so nutritionally speaking, I stopped drinking coffee. I stopped drinking coffee because you had told me that it's one of our highest moldy foods. So I stopped drinking coffee and I also took out dairy and I took out gluten and I stopped doing refined grains. When I got into the parasite phase, it was so interesting because I this is like TMI, but I literally became obsessed with like looking through, like, okay, I need a skewer.
Mhm.
And then I mean, your mind is just blown at what comes out of your body. And when I finally had like a real understanding, you had taught me of like how much parasites consume and hold on to the different toxins in our bodies. I felt like I was really it was nice to have something tangible that was being released, like, "Oh, this is real." Like, people say, "Oh, you have parasites." No, I legitimately had parasites. Like, I
Yeah,
was
you have
pulling them up
visible
out of the
proof.
toilet. It was crazy. It was crazy. And I felt like that was when my energy went from, like, -2 to, like, through the roof. All of a
Mm,
sudden, I'm having energy. I'm still having all these really weird neurological nervous system symptoms, but my energy was like, "Man, I feel like I could go run a mile right now." And that's also when I started reintroducing my exercise because I was just sitting for months at a time because I physically couldn't do it. And then that's when I started walking, just walking around the block and then
mhm.
walking farther. And then maybe I'm going to try to add in a little bit of weight. And now I'm walking 2 miles, you know? So I felt like that was my first breakthrough, even though all of these symptoms were still very, very visible and like plaguing me. I had energy, and that was everything at that point.
Yeah, so energy was one of those first things to come back.
Yeah, it was. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and then we moved through some more detailed liver and kidney cleansing and
Mhm.
specific binders that are targeted at viruses, radiation, chemicals, and then eventually heavy metals and environmental toxins. And it was interesting because as we experience like these peaks together, it's like, yeah, the energy is back. And at a certain point, brain fog started to go away, get a little bit more enthusiastic and hopeful about this is not the rest of my life. I feel like I'm
Mhm.
healing. Then, we might start something new and then more symptoms would come. And that was really indicative of what was going on internally.
Yeah.
And I specifically when we started addressing heavy metals, some symptoms started to return, right?
Yes. So I would say a way to describe this whole experience is you literally have like you not literally, figuratively, but you have peaks and valleys where you have these valleys. And I would say that the parasite cleanse was a peak because I felt, okay, Lord, there's change happening. This is positive. I'm getting energy. I'm seeing these crazy parasites in the toilet. And then I went through a valley, and that was the heavy metals. It was like I was depressed the whole time. I remember calling you. I was on a walk, and I remember it was a beautiful sunny day outside, and I couldn't feel any of it. I was just thinking, normally I would see the green and I would feel the warmth of the sun and see the blue sky and feel this is such a beautiful day. You could feel it. And I felt nothing. It was just blah. Or
Mhm.
just that you wake up in the morning and feel this is all there is, I guess, and it was like that for the whole 3 months. And you are really my lifeline in that because when I called you and you told me that that was what happened, I thought, okay, I need to ride this out. This is just a season. And I think those were the small little morsels that helped me keep going with like, this is just a
Yeah.
season. Once I learned that this is a peaks and valleys experience, I just said, okay, I trust you, Lord. You're bringing me through this for a reason and it'll pass and something new will come. And definitely
Yeah, it's like
the heavy metals was the hardest. It was the hardest phase for me.
yeah. It's like they say healing is not linear, and they show
Mhm.
you that graph where it's like up and down, up and down, up and down. You just think it's gonna be smooth sailing once you get the right
Mhm.
thing going, but the body heals on its own timeline, and we all have our own exposures, and it's very individual. So
Very, yeah.
nobody can predict. when that next peak or when that valley is going to come or how long it's going to last. But the entire process that's happening behind the scenes is that real whole body deep detox, which then is contributing in the end to a much better outcome. But um, there's some, there can be some dark days in there where you think, oh no. And let's talk about for a second, like the emotional parts where that depth of, "Is this gonna be for the rest of my life?" Like, how did you feel you were able to wade through all of that and still find hope to keep going and to press on and finish? Because we still had a little bit more to do in terms of targeting stealth infections after that phase. So, how'd you keep it up?
That this is where I just say Jesus because um I grew so much closer to the Lord in this time. I had days where I would sit my husband built me an infrared light panel that I put in my closet when I first got sick, and I would sit in front of that panel and I would cry and sob and cry with the thoughts of fear of this is forever, or I have MS, or what if this killed me? Like, am I dying? Like, what? I don't know what's happening. I have no answers. And what it really came down to was this fear of I am totally out of control and I have no idea what's going to happen next.
Mhm.
And one day I just remember looking at Joel, my husband, and going, what if I do this? What if this happens to me for the rest of my life? And he's like, what if the Lord called you to do this for the rest of your life? Would you still worship him? Would you still love him? And I just cried and was like, yes. And I don't know why that gave me comfort. I think it was the understanding that the Lord's with me in this and he's going to bring me through this season. And it is a
Mhm.
season. And it was like the symptoms would change. I'd have good days. I'd have really bad, deep, dark days. A year. So I got sick August 2021. In July 2022, I worked out for 10 minutes and I had the biggest panic attack I'd ever had after that. And that was almost a year later. So
Mm.
I was still dealing with stuff that really would just plummet me into despair. And it just helped me to see that this world is not all there is.
Yeah.
And we are called to suffer. And my prayer at that point in my life was, Lord, just help me to suffer well. And I think that's really what helped me get through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
beautiful. I can relate to that completely. My own experience, I remember likening it to childbirth and how my
Yes.
midwives would say, you have to surrender. Like, you're
Mhm.
not going to make any progress if you're fighting every contraction. This baby is designed to come out and it will surrender and just accept this whole process. And once I fully understood that body, mind, and soul, I felt like my entire birthing process like up leveled and home births became magical experiences rather than like
Mhm.
this incredibly, painful, traumatizing situation that it could
Mhm.
have been. And when I went through my own chronic illness, it was like that same level of surrender. And it was that, like you're describing, that realization that you are not in control as much as we like to fool ourselves and think that we are. And that, especially as believers, we know that God promises that He will work all things for our good. And it's like you have the faith of a mustard seed. You have no idea how it's going to get as big as a mountain or ever grow, but you just trust that it does. And all of a sudden, like faith, the very essence of faith becomes so important and it
Mhm.
becomes like understood in ways that we didn't understand it before. And it seems to me like this is how I have said, and you have said, and many others have said, like, I wouldn't wish this on anyone and I wouldn't want to go through it again, but wow, did it teach me a lot. And there were
Yes.
gifts that came out of it that you're taking into and I'm taking into the next season
Mhm.
of life. And so it's just like, it's redeeming and it feels like, okay,
Mhm.
eventually that dark night of the soul, a light turns on and it gets brighter and brighter and brighter until we can look back and go, wow, I don't know how I made it through it, but I'm so glad that I did.
Yes, and I think that surrender because I have totally described that experience like childbirth before. In
Mhm.
fact, I say to many people, our life, chronic illness or not, our life is so much like childbirth. Like, I'm so thankful that I had midwives and childbirth educators to teach me how to breathe through a contraction because I would have no clue how to surrender to this process if I hadn't experienced that, because it really is a lot like that. And it was that surrender that really helped me to get through, but also tap into that understanding of how to battle the anxiety of it all.
Yeah.
Because at one point, I got to a point where I was going, what is like symptoms of stuff my body is trying to heal from? And what is just the symptoms of the anxiety of the fear of it all? They were
Yes.
overlapping. And so I couldn't tell really what was what until I learned surrender, taking deep breaths, just stopping and breathing and letting go. And that's really where I started to learn more of like I knew I had seen a lot of people talk about chronic illness and how there's trauma related to that and how that's part of the issue with it as well. Is like we store it in our body and those emotions and learning how to feel my emotions and process them, but not react upon them where my my go-to was I feel angry, so now I'm stressed because now I have
Mhm.
conflict and now I have to fix this problem for this person, this problem. And that was surrender rolled into I don't have to fix everyone's problem. That's not my job. And I'm
Mhm.
allowed to say no. And that's where I started to realize so much stress. I really feel looking back now that stress was a major component of what happened to me.
Yeah.
And so the surrender rolled into learning tools of how to, because we can't get rid of stress. I mean, at one point I was like, seeing reels and stuff on Instagram where it's like, oh, you need to get rid of all the toxic relationships in your life. You need to do this and that. And I'm like, I have 6 children and a husband. I can't get rid of my children and my husband. Like, I'm going to
Yeah.
encounter stress in my life.
Mhm.
But it became understanding how to respond to the stress.
Yes.
And so I'm still learning that. I mean, that's a steep learning curve, but my body really responded to it. And those experiences of anxiety, of the deep brain fog, like the dissociation, being dissociated was one of my biggest, strongest symptoms. And I still get it every now and then. Like it will just pop up for like days at a time. But my body responded where I wasn't as shaky on the inside, or I started realizing I feel I feel like I'm tremoring on the inside, like I'm trembling. And then I realized if I stopped and took like 3 deep, deep breaths, like cleansing breaths, and just held my hands out like, "My hands are open, Lord." Like, "My hands are open." I recognized that it would go away. I mean, it was within minutes, it would go away. So,
Yeah.
it was really interesting that because I feel like before I would hear those things and be like, "Nah," you know? Like,
Right.
just,
Yes, me
that's
too.
not a thing. But then I'm
I
like, "No, this
know.
is a thing. This is the thing."
Yeah, I would be like, "Oh, come on, like some deep
Yeah.
breathing is gonna help me. My problems are huge."
Yep.
But
But
nourishing
it
the
worked.
nervous system and there's so many tools to be able to do it. There's so much more than just deep breathing. But
Mhm.
like you said, you gotta look at it from all different angles. You gotta look at the incoming stress. You gotta look at your sleep. You gotta look at the nourish of nutrition. You have to look at your relationships in your life, and all of these things factor into that whole component of the nervous system and the role that stress plays in our life. And
Mhm.
sometimes we underestimate it
Mhm.
until it's like, if you don't force yourself to slow down, your body will do it for you kind of concept.
Yes.
And it's like, if you're not going to take the steps to take care of yourself, if you're lucky, your body will teach you this lesson itself and force
Yeah.
you to slow down before some you know, bigger diagnosis comes down the pike, etcetera. So,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, all those tools to turn things around, you realize you are like a cruise ship in a bay trying to like do a U-turn. And it takes a while to get this entire thing turned around. But with some proper tools, you've experienced the benefits almost
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah, and because you mentioned sleep, one of the things that my husband was like, "You are doing this and you are not straying from this," was, we had known that, okay, sleep is so important. I was very tired. I wanted to just sleep, sleep, sleep. And he was like, "You are in bed at 8 o'clock and you will sleep until you get out of bed." So it was like
Hmm.
every night he was like shuffling me off to bed. I would sit with the little boys. We'd read a couple stories, but then it was bedtime. And some mornings I wouldn't get out of bed till 10, 11 in the morning. And that was probably for the first 3 months or so. And I feel like that was healing. That was a blessing for me because I know a lot of people can't do that, but I really feel like that contributed to a lot of my healing in the
Yeah,
beginning was getting that
prioritizing.
the
Mhm.
restorative sleep. And even now I try and get in bed at 10 and I would love to do the 5 a.m., but I actually question am I ready for that? So I usually don't get out of bed till like 7:30.
Mhm.
But,
Mhm.
just prioritizing sleeping because before that was one thing for sure that I didn't prioritize, and I don't think a lot of women prioritize when we should.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you
Uh,
mentioned, the restorative sleep. It
right.
Our body regenerates itself while we're sleeping, and when we're go, 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 we don't prioritize that, then when is it that we actually give back to our body so that it can continue to give back to us?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. That was a huge, huge thing, and, I mean, everyone was running the house except for me. All my kids were cooking and making meals, and my husband was doing everything else, and I was in bed most of the time. So that was a huge blessing. So sleeping and then when I started moving my body more, I got even more energy. I got more energy out of that. And that's been the one thing that has really stuck with learning how I've been learning how to move my body and exercise without simultaneously stressing it out, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Because before I was working out. It was like 5 AM, get up, work out, go. I was teaching at a school at the time, like a little homeschool hybrid, and my life was so stressful. It was like go, 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 go until 11 o'clock midnight, and then I was up at 5 AM, 6 AM, and then I was working out, and I was doing hard workouts. And at the time, the mindset is like, "Well, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. See, I'm working out, I'm moving my body," but it was actually contributing to my stress.
Yes.
Versus now I'm learning how to listen to my body because there's some days where I just feel too heavy or I don't feel good. One thing I would get, even now I get it on and off, is when I would work out, I would have so much brain fog afterwards for like an hour, 2 or 3 hours. And it wasn't a reason for me to stop, but it was a reason for me to listen to my body. Like how do I feel today? Right now at this moment? And can I handle another circuit? Can I handle another rep? Can I handle another round? And then I realized I push my body really, really hard. I push my
Mhm.
body really
Yeah.
hard and I have really high expectations. I need to be able to say, Kyla, you're not going to finish today and be okay with that. And that was
Yes.
hard.
Like knowing your limits
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
respecting your body where it's at
Yeah.
and not letting the ego get involved there.
definitely.
We all have what we think we should be able to do.
Yes.
What else, like, brought you over to the other side? Like, how did what were, like, signs to you that you were like, I am getting over the hump. I have fewer symptoms. I'm getting better." What were some more peaks that you experienced?
The peaks, I it was hard to determine when you're in the midst of it because it's been such a long drawn out process. So it will be 3 years in August, this summer, it'll be 3 years. And eventually what I started doing was I was writing every day. I started just taking tabs of all my symptoms. Eventually, I had a gratitude book and then I had a symptom book. And every time I wrote symptoms, I would write something I was thankful for, or I'd pray. I'd just write to the Lord, you know?
Mm,
And I have journals of all of those symptoms. And like I can't I guess you would call it a flare up. When I get a flare up, I always go back to those journals and I look back and I go, "Dang, this is what I was going through." I'd say, "I haven't had that in a while. I haven't had that in a long time," because it's hard to keep tabs on it when it's such a long, slow, drawn out process. So every year now on our anniversary, I'll say, "I remember last year on our anniversary, I was feeling this way." Or I remember last year on my son's birthday, I was feeling like this. These things happened to me in the night or they were happening to me in the day. And I don't feel that way anymore. So it was almost as if in the beginning, I had these doomsday thoughts of like, this is going to be my forever. This is never going away. What if it gets worse? Right? That was my biggest fear. What if keeps getting worse? And then as the months went on, I would start having chunks where I was like, gosh, I haven't had dissociation in like a month. That is so cool. And I would just be so thankful and so happy. And then those chunks started becoming, like months at a time. And so I just kind of started measuring them off of a date each year. This is how I felt then. I feel better now. And then I could kind of have like a viewed out uh, scope of the timeline of like this. I was worse last year. I'm better this year. I'm not healed completely, but I'm better. And I feel that way like sitting here right now. I can look back at last year and go, I feel better today than I did this month last year. And so that's
yeah.
kind of how I've been keeping tabs on it of knowing and that's the hope in it is like, okay, I am getting through this. I am getting better, I am getting better. I'm having symptoms that I haven't had in a long, long time. Granted, I still have some things like I do still get flare up and in those valleys, I I tell people all the time, those are almost harder than when they were happening all the time because I just get this huge chunk of time where I feel amazing and then I don't. And then you have to battle those thoughts of oh man, it's back or why do I still
Mhm.
experiencing this? And then that saying healing isn't linear. You feel like you take all these steps back and then but yeah. So the last flare up I had was in January, February ish. I just felt off for about a month and a half. And I had one of the episodes at night that I would have where I would kind of feel like the waves, or my heart would be pounding, my hands would be throbbing, I would be hot. It wasn't as bad. It wasn't as bad as the very hard ones I used to have previously to that. So,
Yeah. And so, yeah, so expand a little bit more. Like, what's your health experience like now? And what tools are you relying on to maintain optimal health?
so right now, I would say that I prioritize my sleeping, my resting. I'm not I'm not signing up for as much as I used to sign up for. I still like to go out. I hang out with my friends and we do stuff and I'll fill the schedule, but I'm very mindful about how I fill it, how much I fill it. And then So prioritizing the sleep, I I try to do the best I can with food. And that I'm just saying that because we have 6 children, we can't afford to do everything organic and all the like amazing supplements. In fact, I'm actually not even on any supplements right now. I just decided to break from supplements because I've just taken so many in the past 3 years. And the way I was doing supplements was actually getting the nutritional panels from my primary care. And so I would take supplements based off of what I was low in. So I'm not doing as many supplements, but I try to eat well. I try to watch what I eat as far as making sure that my diet is consistently coming from whole foods, whether that's organic or not. So I eat lots of whole foods. I eat lots of vegetables. I eat not refined grains, but I'll do like oat groats. I'll do regular rolled oats. I'll do quinoa. I'll do black rice or brown rice. And then obviously I eat meat, so I really try hard to hit that protein goal, just to give my body the nutrients that it needs. And then I work out every day. So I walk 2.5 miles every day. If I can't get a workout in, I'm always trying to prioritize my walking because I feel so amazing when I walk. Even when I had
You.
yeah, even when I had really hard days, if my anxiety level is like high and I can feel like, "Oh, I got some stuff coming on," I'll just walk. I'll put on a weighted vest and I'll walk and sometimes I just walk extra long and then I just leave the weights out of it. But generally speaking, I lift heavy weight probably like 5 times a week, and then I walk two and a
Good
half
for you.
miles every day, and my Sundays are my rest days, like my full on rest break days. And then I try and do balance because I can't get too stressed about, "Oh, I didn't get a workout in today," or, "Oh, I didn't eat this," or, I shouldn't eat that." I treat myself every now and then. I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna have some ice cream tonight." Yeah. Like, I'm like, there needs to be some balance and some joy in all of this at the same time. Just, like,
Yes.
trying to maintain that mindset that, "Oh my gosh, if I have some ice cream, like, it's not gonna make me go nuts." I
Right.
wouldn't have had I wouldn't have touched ice cream 2 years ago, but I'm just not in that place anymore. So I
Right.
feel like I have a lot more room to be like, I wanna enjoy life. I think that's part of it. I
Yeah.
think part of it is being able to let go and enjoy, like, the blessings from the Lord, like, all these good things that come down from you, Lord, like, I wanna enjoy them. I don't wanna
Yeah.
not partake because I'm scared. I don't wanna do
Yeah.
anything out of fear, you know,
Yeah.
because that just continues to contribute to that cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I would say it's been a lot of lifestyle changes. And I would say that I try to keep it as simple as possible. I haven't had the chance to do the early morning sun on my face. That's my next goal.
Oh,
My
yes.
next goal.
Yeah.
But everything else I'm trying to I just have these basic sleep, the things I'm eating, moving my body, getting clean water, just very basic stuff that I try and keep. And I take an Epsom salt bath almost every night in the winter.
Okay. Yeah. Well, like they say, the basics work if you work the basics.
Yeah. I think
So,
that was the bit that was probably the biggest lesson out of all of this was it doesn't
mhm.
have to be that complicated. I think
Right.
we're just inundated with so much information in this
Mm.
information age. That was one of the things that I had to do to cut my anxiety was cut off social media.
Yeah.
I had to learn self-control on social media and know who I was gonna listen to, who wasn't I gonna listen to.
Right.
Yeah, that was a big
Yeah.
one.
And you learn to trust your own intuition when you know
Mhm.
what inside, you know what's going to be best for you rather than listening to some professional who has no idea who you are. Like taking blanket advice just because it's good doesn't mean that it's
Yeah.
for you.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
that.
Yeah,
Well, you
absolutely.
kind of already answered this, but this is just a question that I ask everyone. And it is that what is one thing you do on a daily basis to improve your health?
I would say exercise. Exercise is a really big one for me. I very much value and treasure my ability to exercise. I think I took it for granted before I was sick. Your mind, I don't know if you had this experience, but I definitely experienced the mindset of I can't use my body in the ways I used to be able to use it. And that makes me really sad.
Mhm.
And coming out of that and doing my own research, everybody says exercise is good for you, exercise is good. Everyone knows that exercise is good for you. But when I actually read it for myself and just saw just how much it brings down our risk for like all cause mortality, I thought, this is a huge blessing. I can move my body. And I mean like just walking. You don't have to like, I mean,
Go to a gym or
you don't
class.
have, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't have to
it's
be
free.
like
It's
crazy
outside.
CrossFit, all this stuff. Yeah, it's like just walking, and that was amazing. Once I knew just walking, like the zone 2 stuff was like, "Hey, you will live longer if you just walk every day."
Mhm.
I thought, "That's brilliant. Of course that's how we're designed. It's so
Yeah.
simple." You know? But I really enjoy working with weight. I really enjoy getting stronger. That's one of my goals is that I want to build more muscle just because I
Mhm.
know as I age, my muscle's gonna decrease, and muscle just does so many good things for our internal processes. So,
Yeah.
so I would say exercise is a big one. I try not to stress about it because sometimes I'm like, I need to get my workout in, and then my husband will be like, maybe you shouldn't work out today because you're kind of getting, you're kind of stressing about this. It's making you stress, and I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. I'll just walk. So I would say exercise. That's a really big one for me.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that, and I love all your reasons behind it.
Mhm.
Well, Kyla, thank you so much for sharing your story today. I feel the vulnerability, I feel your openness, I feel the despair and the hope that you found through it all. And I am just very blessed to know that you are on the other side of the worst of it and that everything that you have been through has contributed positively to everything you've learned about yourself and the world that you live in. And it's given you more confidence and tools and just that trust and empowerment really to
Mhm.
just be your own advocate when you know what's best for yourself and all those many benefits that have come from all of this. So, thank you for sharing your story today. I really appreciate it and I hope we get to see each other soon. I know the conferences have now been moved to Texas, at least temporarily, so I don't get to see you next
Yeah.
week, but soon I'll get my arms around you and be able to hug you. But it's just
Yeah.
been an absolute pleasure to walk with you through all of this. And I just want to thank you for allowing me on the inside of your health journey. And I want you to just know that you always have a cheerleader and a supporter and a health advocate in me. So as I am rooting you on, just thank you for being here today and sharing this with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me share it. I'm happy to share it. I think it's good for I know when you shared your story with me, it really instilled me with hope. And so I hope that, another woman or man out there experiencing something chronic and feeling scared because their body's seemingly out of control and they're facing the unknown, I hope it brings them hope too.
Yeah, guaranteed, guaranteed it will.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Kyla.
Yeah.
And
Thanks, Tracy.
all right. Well, for all of my listeners on Tracy Erin Talks, thank you for being here for this episode today. I hope you enjoyed Kyla's story as she shared from her heart what she went through. And thank you for being a part of my community. And as I like to say, stay beautifully balanced, my friends. Until next time. Thank you for joining me today on Tracy Erin Talks. I hope you found today's episode enriching to your life. If you enjoyed today's content, would you consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a review? That simple act helps this podcast get into the hands and ears of many more women just like you. Remember, anything you want and do not yet have will require a new set of beliefs, thoughts, actions, and a new you. I am honored to be on this journey with you as we wholeheartedly pursue true health and wellness in mind, body, and soul.